I'm C.A. Truss, Executive Producer of the Veterans Channel. Recently, we had the opportunity to speak with Senator Devlin Robinson, State Senatorial Representative of Pennsylvania District 37, which include parts of Allegheny and Washington counties in southwestern Pennsylvania. Senator Robinson grew up in the Brookline area of Pittsburgh, and after graduating from Pittsburgh Central Catholic High School, he joined the United States Marine Corps, and following the 9/11 attacks, requested to be assigned to the infantry, ensuring his role as a grunt, which landed him in the front lines for one tour of duty in Afghanistan and 2 tours in Iraq. As a grunt and Nasiriyah, better known as Ambush Alley, Devlin and his unit fought door to door to rescue Army POW Jessica Lynch. Special assignment host for the Veterans Channel, Lexi Kamphaus, spoke with State Senator Robinson about growing up in the Pittsburgh area, being a U.S. Marine, the rescue of Jessica Lynch, and his commitment to serving his constituents, as well as having an open-door policy when it comes to serving our nation's veterans. Plus, we discovered that he operates out of one of the coolest offices that we've ever seen. It's one that displays mementos and photographs, not just from his term as a Marine, but mementos and photographs from his father's tour of duty as well. But before Lexi's interview with State Senator Robinson, please bear with me as I say, OORAH, Senator Robinson, OORAH.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning and letting us interview you. Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up for you in Pittsburgh.
I grew up in Brookline, went to Resurrection, played every sport that I could play, went to Central Catholic and graduated in 2001, and I was a lifeguard at the time, and I wanted to join the Marines, but I said that I wanted to wait until after that summer was over of 2001, and the recruiter, who they usually want you to go in as quickly as possible, just said, "Oh, I understand," you know. And so I had a ship out date for October 15th, and I was home to see September 11th, and changed my contract to infantry on that day.
Did you always know that you wanted to be in the military?
Yes. My mother's father was a Marine on Guadalcanal, and he passed away whenever I was 6 years old. But I always remembered that he would work out in the backyard in the garden and had a tattoo on his arm. And I thought that that was the coolest thing in the world because nobody at that time had a tattoo. And I said that I'm going to go and get one of those tattoos. So.
And is that why you specifically chose the Marines?
I actually wanted to be in the Air Force because I was interested in flying planes. And I was actually in between a soccer game in the 7th grade. My father took me to Wendy's on West Liberty.
Yeah.
And was asking me what I want to be whenever I grow up. And I said, I want to fly planes for the Air Force. And he said, you know, the Marines have planes. And that was it. I said, okay, that, you know, planes was number one. And then whenever I found out that the Marines had a Air Corps, I wanted to fly for the Marines, but I wanted to enlist whenever I got to high school.
So when you enlisted, where did you attend boot camp?
Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay. And what was that like for you? What was your boot camp experience?
Boot camp. Parris Island is a magical place. I remember marching, and the license plate said South Carolina, beautiful places and smiling faces. And I said, I see neither of those. So boot camp for the Marine Corps is 13 weeks. And my father, who was also in the Marines, he told me, don't go in the summertime because South Carolina is unforgiving in the summer. So I was already, being that I was a lifeguard anyways, I was already kind of planning to go in the fall to alleviate some of that pressure in the summertime. But, you know, whenever I got there on October 15th, it was still, 100% humidity, at least 80, 85 degrees. And, it's essentially a swamp on the east coast of South Carolina, at the southern tip of South Carolina. And there were sand fleas. So whenever you would walk through the sand, and the sand was everywhere, you would kick up all these fleas and they would just start eating you alive. And you weren't allowed to kill them. You weren't allowed to swat them. You just had to sit there and let them eat you.
That's my nightmare.
Yeah.
So you were home and watched 9/11. What was your thought process knowing that you were enlisting before that even happened? So 9/11 happens. What goes through your head?
Well, before that, my mother kept saying, I don't want you to join the Marines. She was trying to get anybody that she could find to talk me out of it, and I was dead set on going. But her excuse was, in the winter and spring of 2001, the world just isn't a safe place right now. And obviously it had been the longest time of peace that the United States had been in. And I said, what are you talking about? Nothing's going on. And her compromise to me was that I had to get my wisdom teeth out before I went to boot camp. And on the morning of September 11th, I was actually down the road at the facial surgeon, I guess the dentist office. And I was the first appointment in the morning, 8 a.m. And it was just to look at my teeth because I had surgery the next week scheduled. And I think that they were looking to see if they were impacted. And he just kind of, open up your mouth. Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
So I went out to the front desk to see if I had a copay or if I had to do anything, and looked up at the TV, and the first tower was hit. So I was, dumbfounded. I think like most people. I got in the car. I drove home and turned on the TV. It was on every channel, and I was sitting there watching, and they weren't saying what it was. They didn't know what it was. And I just remember the news broadcaster talking, and then right over his shoulder, you saw another plane hit the second tower. And I just said, oh boy. I was already signed up for the Marines. And I just, I looked at it like it was the Pearl Harbor moment of my generation. And I waited, I saw the Pentagon get hit. And I actually saw the flight 93 that crash landed in Somerset County. It flew over the South Hills of Pittsburgh that day, and heard that there had been a plane that crashed in a field in Somerset. And I waited about an hour or two because I thought that my recruiter was going to be bombarded with phone calls. And I called him up and I said, so what's going on? And he was really somber. He was just like, well, yeah, it's really shocking that you see these two buildings are standing there 1 minute, and then the next minute, they're gone. And kept talking, and I was like, yeah, okay. So am I going early or what? He's like, oh, no. I think he thought that I was going to try backing out of my contract. And he said, no. We have enough people. We're just going to wait on what the president says. But as of right now, you're scheduled to leave within 4 weeks, and we're going to keep your schedule. And so I said, okay, well, change my contract. I want to go to the infantry to make sure that I was actually going to go and fight in this war.
And you changing your contract to infantry, knowing now what you went through, is that what you were expecting to do?
No. Well, I mean, Iraq wasn't even, a thought in anybody's mind on September 11th or whenever I changed it. So I'm glad that I changed the contract to infantry. I'm glad that I, was able to have that experience. But, nothing could prepare you for what, lay ahead.
How soon after you enlisted, went to boot camp, that you were going overseas?
Just about a year. So I graduated from boot camp the first week in January of 2002. And I was on a ship the first week in January 2003 to head over to Iraq.
Okay. And what was it like serving in Afghanistan and Iraq? How are they different?
Each tour was completely different. Iraq, during the invasion, my first tour, it was very fast, very uncontrolled, I would call it. We were rushing up to Baghdad. We took Baghdad in a little over 3 weeks, and just the type of combat that you were in was a lot of small arms fire, a lot of movement. We were trying to avoid being stuck inside the city during that first time, but yet we kept leapfrogging to all the cities. And then an occupation to follow after Baghdad fell. Afghanistan was completely different. There was really no cities to occupy or to maneuver in. Kabul had already been taken. It was about 2.5, 3 years after September 11th, and our mission was to push out north of Kabul into the northeastern region of Afghanistan, which is a very mountainous region, very primitive. Still, there were villages with mud huts and thatch roofs and things like that built into the mountains, very remote. So we'd have to be helicoptered in and dropped off for a lot of those missions in these villages. And it was also right on the Pakistani border, so a lot of ambushes that would happen to us, we would pursue them up until the Pakistani border, and we couldn't cross over there. And then on the third tour was Fallujah, which was, it was all urban warfare, all fighting, and then a lot of what we called improvised explosive devices, which were roadside bombs. So, you just kind of watch the progression and the evolution of the enemy's technology rapidly change. And we were still kind of lagging behind in that defense.
Okay. Now getting into a more sensitive topic, now there are many conflicting reports regarding the capture and rescue of Jessica Lynch, who I don't know if you knew her personally before that time, but how did you learn of her capture?
The morning of March 23rd, 2003, we were moving into Nasiriyah. My unit was assigned to capture the south bridge of Nasiriyah. And if you want to look at that map right there, that's a map of Nasiriyah.
Oh, wow.
So the bridge going over, that's the Euphrates River on the bottom, and that's the Saddam Canal up in the north. So the unit ahead of me, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, were assigned to take the northern bridge. We were assigned to take the southern bridge. As we were passing through to get to the southern outskirts of the city, we came upon blown out vehicles, and the unit ahead of us had rescued some Army soldiers, what I found out to be Army soldiers, and they were actually moving south while we were moving north, and I was able to see them kind of working on the soldiers and triaging them inside their armored vehicle as they were moving south past me as I was going north. So I knew that there was combat ahead of me. I didn't know that there was POWs at that time. There then was, skirmishes all through the city of Nasiriyah. And by the time that night started to fall, the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines were able to secure the northern bridge, and we moved outside the city and secured the southern bridge. And my first sergeant kind of came through, and he was walking, and so we had heard, there's always rumors, but they said, well, there were 2 soldiers killed, but we think that there's about 15 missing in action. And I said, well, obviously there's got to be more than 2 killed in action. Then they came down and said that there's numerous POWs. And there were actually 5 or 6 Army POWs in addition to her. But what we found out later as we were moving through the city is that those other 5 weren't wounded, and they were taken up and taken closer to Baghdad, where she was wounded pretty badly. She was shot 3 times in one leg and once in another leg, and so she had to stay at the hospital there. So that's whenever we began kind of searching for her. And we knew that there were also soldiers that were killed that we had to go find. We had to find their bodies. So in the southern region where we were, that's when our mission changed to, it was a search and rescue. And we found, a lot of clues. We would go to houses where we would find uniforms in their packs, and, the locals were eating the food from their packs. So we found 2 of the bodies that were buried out in one of the yards in a shallow grave, and we dug them up and brought them back.
Now, her rescue specifically, can you tell me in as much detail as you can how that went for you, and kind of the he said, she said to how that went down?
Yeah. Well, I still don't think that the Marine Corps actually has a definite story of how it went down. But I can tell you that we were going through a southern industrial park in Nasiriyah, and we were finding where a lot of the defensive positions, the Fedayeen had dug in their defensive positions. And there were weapons and ammunitions and mortar rounds and artillery rounds stacked up to the ceiling in a wall outside of what looked like a grade school. They had taken that over because there was a courtyard, and they had bashed through the bricks to make a window out into the courtyard, and they had opened up the ceiling so that they could put mortar rounds through the ceiling so that we couldn't fire directly at them. And there was a gentleman that had led us to a lot of those ammunitions through this industrial park. And so we were, collecting them and stacking them up so that we could blow them all up. Now, before that happened, though, there were 2 people of military age that came up to our unit and said, I know where the American POW is. Here, she's at this hospital. So whenever we would go to those hospitals, we would be ambushed. So this was actually the 3rd person that showed up to tell us, hey, she's at this hospital. Now, the difference is that those other 2 guys, because we all talked about it, those other 2 guys actually were wearing black military boots and civilian clothing. And this gentleman was he was almost dressed like me. He was actually in a very clean white shirt. He was older, and he was already showing us a lot of the ammunition dumps, for us to blow up. And I just remember looking at my gunnery sergeant, and I said, hey, Gunny, you really believe this guy? And he's like, absolutely not. But we have to run it up the chain of command. And so didn't think anything of it. I went to sleep. That night we were in a blown out building, and we were woken up at, I can only assume, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, something like that. It was still dark, and we were set up as a cordon around the hospital. And we were still, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And the helicopters came in. We called them flies because that's what they sounded like. They were small helicopters. And they ended up being Navy SEALs, went through the roof, rescued her, loaded her on. Another helicopter flew her out. And we got on the trucks and we went to Devlin. And that was it.
So, I mean, in the media, the Navy SEALs got the credit for the rescue. They got the awards they got.
They were given silver stars.
Yeah, did that leave a little taste in your mouth?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like I said, I mean, we dug up bodies
Right.
of her unit. We found all the clues. We, got ambushed looking for her. And it was kind of like the Steelers marching all the way down the field and then, sending in the new guy to just punch it through the end zone.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, it wasn't about us. It was about rescuing her. And,
Right.
and we're glad that she's safe and sound.
And do you know what she's doing today? And
I heard that she's a teacher in West Virginia. She went back to her hometown and became a teacher.
And after that, did you ever get a chance to talk to her or anything?
No. I saw her on the news. She came out. I guess the administration had said that she was acting like, Rambo, that she attacked a machine gun nest and she did other things. And, to her credit, she said, no, I dropped my weapon and I started praying.
Right. How did you go from being discharged from the Marines to now your current role as a U.S. Senator?
After Fallujah, I was sent home actually 3 weeks early than the rest of the unit so that I could check out because my contract was coming up.
Okay.
And so I came home, checked out of my unit and then the Marine Corps, and I was able to see them for 2 days, welcome them home, and then I left and came back to Pittsburgh. So I only had 3 weeks to really transition, as they say, out of the Marine Corps. And by law, you were supposed to have 4 months.
Oh,
So,
wow.
In that time, you were supposed to turn in all your gear. You were supposed to go through all the separations classes. You were supposed to go through all the medical and psychological classes and all those other things in 4 months, and I had to do it in 3. And look for a job, look for a place to live, figure out where you were going to live, and even sign up for school. So
Right.
it was a difficult thing, and I was coming back to Pittsburgh. I didn't really have any other type of support network, so I moved back in to my parents' house where I left 4 years earlier, and I knew that that's not obviously where I wanted to be after 3 tours. So it just became, you got to go find a job, you got to for an apartment, you got to do the adult things that you're supposed to be doing.
And then at what point did your ambition start to turn a little bit?
Well, I think it was 2011. I think it was summer of 11. There was my best friend in the Marines. His name was Diego Gonzalez, and I had always said, it had been 4 or 5 years since I got out of the Marines, and I said, I've got to contact him. This was kind of before the days of Facebook. Everybody was on Facebook, and there was a bunch of people that I wanted to contact, but he was somebody that was always kind of stuck in my mind. You got to call him, you got to call him, you got to go find him, Google him, And I was actually at Robert Morris in my second to last semester, and I was doing international finance homework, and popped into my head, do it now, Google him. You got the computer in front of you. And I Googled him, and I had just missed his suicide by maybe a month. And, I'm reading about it, and I just, I had allowed everything that I was consumed with, my business, my house, just life in general, school, and doing all the things that I thought that I was supposed to be doing. And I really wasn't happy at the time, and then this happened, and it was just like, it hits you like a ton of bricks. And so I said, well, I'm never going to let this happen again, and I have to start getting involved. And I met a gentleman that was connected to a place called Semper Fi Odyssey up in the Laurel Highlands, and he said, you should come up here and see what we're all about. And at the time, we it had just been the 10th anniversary of Nasiriyah, the invasion of Iraq. And so we had a reunion down in Quantico, Virginia. And so I had just met one of the generals this general that was running Semper Fi Odyssey knew. And so we made a connection that way. And it was one of these things, like you take your first step in and you listen to the first sentence out of his mouth, and I was just like, okay, I'm hooked. Mm-hmm. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is the next chapter in my life. I didn't dedicate my entire working career towards it, but I was just there being local. I was there to do whatever he needed to do. And I dedicated a lot of time to veterans who were coming through. He would take these veterans that were transitioning out of the Marines and out of the service. He didn't turn anybody. And, it was this transitional program of how to take what you learned in the Marines and apply it to your everyday life and start making these plans. It was something that I didn't have the opportunity to have whenever I got out of the Marines. And it was obvious that's why a lot of people were having problems, is that, on Friday you're discharged, you're with the Department of Defense, and you're discharged, and you're sent home or wherever you decide to land, and mm-hmm. On Monday you're supposed to be picked up by the Department of Veterans Affairs, but there's nowhere to go. You don't know what your benefits are or what right. you're supposed to do, and so this was kind of he was establishing that network where I was able to talk about what I did in business and Robert Morris and University of Pittsburgh and, buying a house and going through the VA loan program, the GI Bill, things like that. So,
mm-hmm. Now, how has your service in the Marines aided to your current role as a senator?
In the Marines, you're in a lot of bad situations, and maybe at the time you don't know the answer to how to fix it, but you just sit there and say, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The mission still has to get done. We have to keep moving, and that's what I try to do as a senator. There's a lot of problems people present to me, mm-hmm. and I just say, okay. I know where step one has to go. I know where I can help you. I'm not going to turn anybody away. We're going to figure this out. And I think that's the main thing, is always making sure you deliver.
And what was it like running? What was the campaign trail like for you?
Tough. I watch what's happening right now in this primary season, and it's ugly. And that's the nature of the business. I always think back to The Godfather, where, Hyman Roth says to him, "This is the business we've chosen." Yeah. It's just, it is what it is. It's not ideal, but nothing that's worth achieving in life is ever going to be easy. So. How
do you deal, knowing in your head you have the best intentions? You want to make a difference, and then you have people on the other side trying to tear you down, trying to knock you down, trying to discredit you. How do you respond to people like that?
They have their own goals and ambitions, and should they choose to be negative about achieving those goals and ambitions, that's just going to be their choice. I try to say that I'm here to manage. I'm here to, manage a district. I always said that I was elected by a district, not a particular party, and that's who I have responsibility to. So, as Mike Tomlin once said, haters are gonna hate. Yeah. And that's it. You just you always have to stay focused on your mission. That's also another thing that I learned in the Marines, is that regardless of what happens, regardless in Nasiriyah that we, were bogged down in the city and there were, POWs and Marines and soldiers were dying, our mission was still to take those 2 bridges, and by the end of the day, you had to take the 2 bridges.
Now, hypothetically, on a little bit of a lighter note, if the leader of the Senate could appoint you to a committee of your choosing, what would your dream committee be?
I would always love to stay with veterans. That's always, no matter where I go or what I do, I'm always going to have a commitment to my fellow veteran. But other than that, I really enjoy being on the Appropriations Committee. That is where you actually get to see the actual management aspect of government. Pennsylvania is a $41 billion a year enterprise, and there's 27 different departments and agencies and a lot of different interests that go into that $41 billion a year. And to find, everybody loves to come out there and say, well, I'm going to cut this program the minute that I go in. Well, now that you're getting these balance sheets in front of you, and you start reading through them, and you start seeing, that there's people that rely on these programs and that they do a lot of good for these people. Yeah, they're not something that you can just cut willy-nilly.
Now, right now, what are some of your top goals for your constituents here?
My top goal for my constituents, number one, is that any state program is working for them. I say, whenever I came in, it was the height of COVID. A lot of people were not getting their unemployment benefits that they paid into. Very frustrating. And really the government is who shut down the economy. So if you shut it down, you should be there to pick up the slack. And we were talking to people that were worried about how they were going to feed their children and pay their rent and pay their mortgage, pay their car loans. It wasn't, it was a very frightening time in our history. So, I wanted to make sure that we were out there and we were doing everything that we could to make sure that people got their benefits and got their payments.
So right now, what needs to be done first as far as helping out the people, especially in your district?
Number one is letting them know where we are and what we're doing. At this breakfast today, it was a veterans breakfast. Now, I don't have a pipeline directly to the federal government the way that I have to the state government to get federal veterans benefits. But what I do is I have a American Legion representative in my office every second Tuesday of every month, and he's there to help veterans with their benefits. Any questions they have, like I said, their disability ratings, their GI Bill, their education benefits, their hospital benefits, their home owner benefits. Anything that they could do.
Now, is that veterans of all ages?
All ages.
Nice.
And we don't, we serve every veteran who's ever served this country. Whenever I was with a homeless veteran shelter, they would say they're only going to do, what they call a good paper discharge, which is other than honorable, general under honorable conditions and up. So there was bad conduct and sometimes dishonorable discharges. We took them in. If you're a veteran and if you were homeless, we made sure that you had a place to live. And we were committed to getting you the help that you needed, whether it was substance abuse, whether it was mental health, if you were bipolar, schizophrenic. We dealt with schizophrenic patients. We got them into the system, and then we actually worked on getting their discharges bumped up to general under other than honorable conditions so that they could actually be in the system. And because, again, at the end of the day, the mission is you got to get the veterans off the street. And, we don't take no for an answer.
Totally agree. Now, what can someone like myself or anyone walking the street, what can we do to help?
Help veterans or help in the state?
Help any cause. Like if you're having, help veterans or just help your platform.
Help help veterans first. The organization that I was just with specialized in listening to veteran stories. And, it doesn't take a lot. But, I was listening to a gentleman who was 101 years old today. And I was listening, he was a fighter pilot in World War II over France and Germany. And to sit there and, it fills you up with a lot of
and I'm sure it filled him up
pride.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
To listen to his story. So that's number one. Number two, if they're having a problem, get them to the place that they need to go. Whether it's the VA hospital, whether it's a veteran charity, get them out there and get them seen by a professional. Some veterans, maybe they don't need any help, and therefore, just listen, be a friend. In terms of anybody else out there that has state-related issues, get them to my office. I've got employees that they're looking for something to do. Like I said, 20 to 7 different departments. We're always open 5 days a week, but we're here to help. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate it so much for you. I know your schedule is crazy busy, especially you're inviting everybody off the street to come see you. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and talking to us a little bit.
Thanks for coming.